Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Just to give you a very quick introduction in terms of who's speaking, my name is Genoa Miacho. I'm the Head of Technology Solutions Development here at Bytes. I typically say it's a role that involves wearing many hats, but my background is predominantly cybersecurity. And in terms of today, here really to talk to you around email security. So in terms of what we've actually got lined up, I'm actually going to do a piece around the Microsoft native capabilities when it comes to email security. And then I'm also joined by Mariana today, who's going to take us through the Darktrace email security piece and how AI can really be used to enhance protection on the email side. Mariana, I will hand over to you in due course. You can definitely give yourself a full introduction from there. For now, I'm just going to rattle on through some of the Microsoft pieces, and then I'll hand over to you. So, I suppose jumping straight into the Microsoft native email protection parts. As we all know, Microsoft is an awesome platform for email. They've provided Exchange for quite a number of years. I think a lot of people say it's probably around before I was born. And during this time there was that shift to the cloud, and that was the early iteration of things like BPOS, or Business Productivity Online Suite, I think it was. So the variation of Office 365 before it was Office 365, and of course that is the successor to this, which was originally based on the Exchange 2010 servers. Now this provided a very stable and actually cost-effective cloud platform. When Office 365 was first about, most of the time it was because of doing Exchange migrations. We want our emails in the cloud because Exchange servers were, an absolute beast to maintain, as well as being an absolute resource hog. But fast forward a little bit, Microsoft then started adding in a lot of different security features, and we've definitely seen significant jumps over the years. And this is both security on Exchange Online, but also quite broadly on Office 365. Security has ramped up almost tenfold. That's especially when we look at things like the Defender stack on Office 365. Now, I suppose some of the noteworthy aspects, especially when we look at Defender for Office 365 and the email security piece, is Microsoft really did start enhancing the prevention and detection means in terms of being able to pick out those malicious emails. But I suppose more importantly, they really took a stance and a focus on being able to conduct investigations into suspicious and malicious emails, and give you that hunting capability. Additionally, because your mailboxes are in Office 365 and Microsoft are providing you that platform, they also give you that platform to actually respond and remediate against a number of these issues. And as we've also seen quite recently, Microsoft has also introduced elements of awareness and training into their platform. So doing things like phishing simulation and enrolling users into training should they fall into that risky category is now something that we can do. So I suppose to almost summarize it a little bit, and I suppose in my view, Microsoft has focused, all up on security. I think we can definitely agree around that. But they've definitely taken quite a big focus on the response and investigate capability, which is great. If something's suspicious in our users' mailboxes, we actually want to go out and do something about that. But in my opinion, there's also still more to be done around the protection and detection capability. And I always feel that a more modern approach to email security comes when we start wrapping in and introducing things like AI to improve our understanding of the I can never say that word, if an email is legit when it actually lands in. So I know I've mentioned AI. I am fully aware that that is definitely Mariana's turf, and I definitely do not want to steal any of her thunder. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to hand over to Mariana to go through, how Darktrace can complement the Microsoft email platform, especially by way of security with an AI-based email protective approach. Mariana, over to you.
Sure, Gennaro, thank you. And yes, I think it's so true. Microsoft has done a phenomenal job and huge investments in bringing their offering to accommodate all sorts of customers according to size, according if they want to be managing that server on, on their premises or online. And I think that by and large, we've moved away the conversation from what kind of infrastructure physically to have, to understand really that the defense capability is pretty much the same no matter where you're holding your emails, whether those are on an on-prem appliance or in the cloud. And exactly as you were saying, in terms of AI, of course, there's a whole world of AI when it comes to different techniques, different approaches. And Microsoft is adding some elements of artificial intelligence into their offering as well. It's important to note. But not all AI is the same. And the approaches that Microsoft and Darktrace have taken are very different, and they're very complementary. And that is why Microsoft selected Darktrace as its security vendor partner. And part of the complementarity, I think, well, of course I'm biased because I'm director of email security products at Darktrace, so that's what I do on a day-to-day. But I think that in email, it's one of the most sort of clear stories where we can sort of show the use cases and the difference of those two complementary technologies. And so, as you said, we fall into this, even you did it, Gennaro, just now, right? Is an email legitimate? And a lot is thought about this binary nature of if something is good or bad. And that's very much how Defender approaches it, and how Microsoft approaches it as well, is across a very large customer base, they can tell whether or not an email is part of a malicious campaign. If enough users have also flagged it as malicious or as spam, that has enough of that critical mass of big data that then allows Defender to take action very quickly to stop the subsequent recipients of that same email from being somehow compromised, if the email is a compromised email, or maybe it's just spam and it's an annoyance. But what Darktrace does is very different. We don't rely on threat intelligence. We're not relying on rules or hallmarks of an attack to tell, okay, well, I know this to be malicious, or I know that this to be bad, which of course changes the way that we're looking at the challenge, because there isn't an obvious bad element sometimes to go on. An email can be undesirable and be from a known contact, or it can be a desirable email from a brand new contact. And so that binary nature, which we sometimes fall into because we've had to oversimplify things for machines to give them rules to follow, doesn't do too well on email. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing the most of, and it's the use case where I see that complementarity like so brilliantly, and then people ask me like, why do I need to invest in both? Well, we're seeing a range of supply chain attacks, right? So yes, there's spoofing and there's impersonation, and somebody's pretending to be your bank or your supplier or Netflix or whatever, right? Here's a communication from a known entity, from a trusted entity that tries to trick you, but it doesn't actually come from that infrastructure. And from a technical point of view, it's actually quite easy to unspoof because there's a slight mismatch. There's like a fuzzy match. It looks sort of similar, but it's not. And for a machine, that's enough. We're not playing, spot the difference here. However, when instead it is your supplier that gets attacked, then it's a whole different kettle of fish, because the email will be coming, excuse me, got my own tempo off there. The email will be coming from a trusted sender, and technologically speaking, there is nothing that signature or there's not a lot that traditional tools can do, because it relies on that trusted relationship. And we saw this play out time and time again. We saw a tweet that went out last year. This poor woman, Eleonora, had to take to Twitter because her email got compromised and her account was used to send a whole flurry of fake invoices. And so she sent out a tweet saying, I cannot apologize enough for this. And that kind of mechanism is exactly the same then that we see over and over and over again. It's much easier to compromise a trusted sender sometimes than it is to attack the client's infrastructure directly. So one of the things that we see, this kind of supply chain attack, but from the AI point of view, is also very, very clear to the artificial intelligence when it's the same infrastructure sending that message, but maybe it's a different human behind the keyboard. So there was an interesting attack also that happened with one of our customers. It's a beverage manufacturer, and one of their suppliers was compromised. And we see, when we see the difference also between a business as usual email that was sent in, there's nothing anomalous about it. The AI will score it at 0% of anomaly. It understands that there's an active correspondence or an active conversation with a history of correspondence between the sender and the recipient. And then out of the blue, we get an email come in with a 100% anomaly score. And you can see in the AI, like on the tags, very clearly, it will say, this is out of character, there is a suspicious link. Yes, this is an established domain, and we have known correspondence. And exactly because we have that context of the existing relationship, that we're able to then say, right, actually, this doesn't sound like that real sender. It sounds like this person has been compromised. Now, you could see it in the tags, but this is also, I think, going to be the year of explainable AI, right? Enough of AI being a black box. We want to understand exactly what that thought process was and what the rationale was. And the other thing that I think is important is also giving the AI the flexibility to change its mind. As new information comes to light, maybe it decides to increase the aggressiveness of the response or decrease the aggressiveness of the response as needed. So you don't need the human to tell the AI, more aggressive, less aggressive. You let the AI work it out according to how the environment is changing. And then what I thought was interesting was, just like the story from Eleonora, in this situation, we then saw like all the emails coming in to different recipients, all scoring at 100% anomaly. And then one of the senders, the sender of the compromised account realizes it and sends, much like Eleonora did, an email saying, hey, warning, phishing mail active, don't trust this. And we see in the AI on the console how then that message was perceived to not be threatening, even though it was very close in time of the sender. So, Gennaro, back to sort of that idea that you were saying about what's legitimate, what isn't. We need to go beyond sort of that obvious yes, no binary to really get the whole context and the big picture. Because that's how we operate, right? Like, I don't quite know why, but I have a gut feeling. Well, for the AI, that gut feeling is explainable in mathematical terms. And then we need to translate those mathematical terms into human-friendly terms. And that's what we do at Darktrace. And that's also why I think it's so powerful to have that Microsoft capability looking at scale across multiple customers, all the environments, all the industries, but complementing that with an AI that is tailored to your specific environments and understands not only your workers, but also those relationships that you have outside of your business with your customers, with your suppliers, and with your partners. Of course, as we look down into the future, we're seeing an increase of automation and sophistication on phishing attacks. Gone were the days in which we only needed to worry about, Prince or Princess Charming sending us some kind of proposition. These emails are getting increasingly sophisticated, increasingly automated, and soon it's sort of like they're closing the loop on that spectrum. On one hand, it's like that spray and pray approach, and on the other one is the super targeted emails specific to either you or me. And now what's happening is that together with automation tools, much like marketing tools that we have for automated campaigns for targeting of offers, it's pretty much the same thing. So attackers are using those tools to automate and improve the subject line, the likelihood of clicking. And we saw at Black Hat last year a research that was put out showing that on average, AI actually created more compelling emails, and done that in a spear phishing situation, more recipients are likely to click. So that's a sort of machine versus machine. And not to scare anyone, but let's not get ourselves outgunned, okay? So let's invest and continue to invest to keep pace with that innovation from the attacker side, because this is the stuff that I see every single day, and I'm sure all of you guys see it. And Gennaro, you and I have spoken so much about attacks that, as you say, get through and hit the inbox. They have no business being in there. So rather than going in and fixing it and pulling them out, I rely on the artificial intelligence to neutralize any aspect of an email that might be an existential risk to the business, but allow the company to continue going on about their work. That's it for me.
No, some very, very interesting points in there. I did love the actual point around Microsoft is, it's broad. there's a lot of telemetry. It's got that global scale, global reach. I mean, the amount of intelligence that Microsoft has, I mean, there's going to be a lot of that to store, but at the same time, there's never really going to be specific to a customer organization. And that tailored piece, that tailored AI aspect that Darktrace can introduce, I think that is a very powerful combination. And when we look at emails in general, this is where most breaches start. It's by emails. It's the most used attack vector. It's still being used, and the reason why it's being used is because it works. And on the attacker's side, there's one hell of a return on investment when it comes to using emails. So definitely some very, very interesting points in there. And I completely take your point in terms of my background. I've always seen it as, a rule list, block, deny, whitelist, blacklist, whatever you want to call it. I get that. That also needs to change to be, very fluid, very dynamic. It has to be, AI driven, because let's face it, attackers are probably using, or they are using AI to craft and shape these attacks. Thank you so much for that piece, Mariana. I'm all good on the Microsoft side. You're all good on the Darktrace side. I think there's definitely some very good content here for everyone to digest today. So I think we're looking like we're coming up to time. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes back. We hope you enjoyed the session today. Please tune in for any of our other sessions. Thank you.